Hello and welcome to the Home Screen Podcast. This is episode 20. Today's going to be another solo episode, a little bit shorter and something a little bit different. Today I'm going to be ranking every single one of this year's Oscar Best Picture nominees. This is the first year that I've actually managed to see every single film of the 10 that are nominated for Best Picture, so I thought it'd be quite cool to give some thoughts and do a ranking to say which I think is the best overall in comparison to each other. I just want to say that I'm ranking these all on my personal enjoyment and preference, and that these are all very good films in their own right, apart from one, which you probably already know, but we'll get to. And then at the end, I'll do just a quick few predictions as how I think some of the major awards will go on the night. So without further ado, let's get into it. Number 10, Emilia Perez. Not to beat a dead horse, but this should be no surprise at all, and it's actually insane that this has garnered 13 Oscar nominations. I think it's one of the most in history, and it's just kind of ridiculous that it's got that many. The one praise that I will give it is that Zoe Saldana is very good in this, at least for the first half. And I think she probably will win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. But apart from her performance, in general, it's just pretty poor. Musical numbers, even though there's one or two that are quite catchy, like Selena Gomez's number, but they're just all insanely short. Like, I think on average they're like 1 minute to like 1 minute 45. They're just incredibly short and kind of forgettable. Shea Frillis did a great video about that, about the music in Emilia Perez. I thought the editing and pacing was off, and in general it's just not the most thrilling watch. I can't say that every single aspect of this is awful, because there are some bits that are moderately impressive. The cinematography is by no stretch of imagination should be Oscar nominated, but it's doing some quite cool modern cinematography, fast moves in conjunction with some of the music. So it's not one of the worst things I've ever seen, but it's definitely the odd one of the bunch, considering the caliber of all the other films. It's just West that this is even nominated. But we'll move on. At number 9, Wicked. So this is an astronomical jump in terms of quality compared to Emilia Perez, and despite being the second to last, it doesn't mean it's a bad film in any regard. Overall, it's just a really great filmic adaptation in my eyes, and I think it added some pretty good scenes to buff out the runtime. It never really felt like it was going for 2.5 hours, and I think that meant that the pacing was just pretty good. The music and choreography is brilliantly done, with phenomenal performances from both Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. In fact, I think Ariana Grande would be my personal pick for Best Supporting Actress. She's just so good in this, far better than I anticipated. The only sort of negative I really have is some of the cinematography and blocking isn't the most flashy. Some of it feels a little bit soap opera-esque, just two shots cutting back between angles. Even if the acting is great, the blocking and shots aren't the most inspired, but that's being picky. I think once it gets into the last act of the film, once they get to the Emerald City, spoilers, it kind of picks up a lot leading up to, of course, Defying Gravity. And yeah, Jeff Goldblum wasn't the best in this, bless him. I don't think it drags the film down, but it was just bizarre. So yeah. Moving on, at number 8, Nickel Boys. I feel like I need to defend myself here because, yeah, I know that it's exceptional. And it being at number 8 doesn't mean it's bad at all. I just preferred some others slightly above this. But I need to give it its flowers. It has some of the best cinematography of the year and some of the most creative cinematography that I think I've ever seen. For those that don't know, pretty much the entire film is told in POV shots from the two main characters. And it tells a pretty tragic, true story that's just captivating. I think this is pretty groundbreaking cinematography, to be honest. I think it's some of the most creative I've seen in a long time. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing what this director and what this cinematographer do next, because I think it's really different. It really stuck with me, and how they filmed some scenes I'm quite baffled by, so very, very impressed with just how it was shot. I guess my closest point of comparison with it being based on a true story is to I'm Still Here. And this didn't quite hit me as hard as that did, just personally. I'm sure for others that this will hit like a truck, and it is very deeply moving. So yeah, I recommend seeing it, of course. See all of these. Maybe not Emilia Perez, but yeah, go and see all of these. But this is definitely one that I'm going to be recommending to people to watch for years to come. In a similar light to how I always recommend After Sun and Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, I think this will be joining the list of like, you should see this because it's just new and fresh and different. At number 7, A Complete Unknown. I was really surprised by this. I didn't think it would work as well as it did. It's a fairly standard biopic with pretty standard directing that isn't too flashy, but it just works. Like, Timothy just disappears into this role, and I frankly hope he wins the Oscar, because you can just tell he really put the time and effort and work into this character. Also, surprisingly, the film made me realise that I just really love folk music. I'm a sucker for Outer Wilds and tons of indie scores, and the film really just solidified that for me, that, oh, I think I actually just like listening to folk music in general, particularly when Ed Norton would come in with his banjo and they'd be duetting and stuff, and yeah, incredible. There's just such palpable chemistry, especially with both the supporting actresses, Elle Fanning and Monica Barbaro, with Timothée Chalamet. Yeah, there's not much else to say. Weirdly, watching A Complete Unknown just made me feel quite creative. It could be down to seeing the process of Bob Dylan's seemingly endless creativity, but it just made me want to work on a project and create something for myself. I just wasn't expecting to be as moved by it as I was, and yeah, I'm definitely think that it deserves its spot on this list. At number 6, The Brutalist. This film in itself is an achievement. It's really monumental filmmaking, and you really just have to respect it for that. The score embodies such a grandiose essence, like really imbues the film with a feeling of importance that you know that you're watching a modern day classic. Kind of like when people at the time would have been watching The Godfather or 2001: A Space Odyssey or Heat. It's kind of like that realising that, oh, this is going to be a classic. And I think that you can definitely get that from The Brutalist. I think in 20, 30, 40 years down the line, people will still be referring to this as one of the greats. As with everyone, yes, I thought the first half was stronger than the second, but there's far more like nitty-gritty conflict and turmoil in the second half, which I thought it never was boring. I thought it was a very compelling watch. I think the first half really embodies and encapsulates the American dream, and it is very much like Laszlo forging his own path. The second half is much more muddy and gritty, but I think there's good things to pull from both halves. I don't think the second half is bad by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just so happy that this exists, particularly with the direction and the choice to shoot how they did. I think it was on VistaVision 70mm. Such iconic shots, like the opening shot, and the way the camera moves and following Laszlo, and the way that light is shown, especially with there being such a hard focus on the architecture. I think the way that this was lit and how that's represented on the film, I think it just looks stunning. Last thing I want to say on this is I think the inclusion of the intermission was really wisely utilised. It ended up feeling like 2 films, and I think that really helped the pacing. It really felt like a 2-hour film and then a 1.5-hour film. The closest comparison really is like when you're watching the Lord of the Rings extended editions, which are often split across 2 discs, and you sort of have to pause and swap discs at the halfway point. This felt very reminiscent of that, and I hope to see intermissions used more often in the future. At number 5, The Substance. It's just so wild that this film exists, let alone to be nominated for Best Picture. I've seen it said online that this is one of the least subtle films ever, and I really agree. It literally screams its message in the most bombastic and mental ways possible, all leading up to the final act, which is just like insane. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen in the cinema. Me and my friend Dan saw this as a screen unseen event at Odeon back, I think, in like October, a few weeks before it was released, and it was just, we were just walked out like, what have we seen? And then it's been cool to then kind of see it in the zeitgeist and more people see it getting all the nominations. Like, it is just needs to be seen to believed. I rewatched this recently with my partner, and yeah, just seeing her reaction and knowing what was coming was a really fun viewing experience, knowing how far it goes. I don't want to spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen it, but this is like next level body horror stuff, which I feel just we don't get in films anymore. Examples that spring to mind in like The Fly and The Thing, like really grotesque kind of practical effects and makeup and prosthetics, like that kind of body horror. Don't really get that much anymore, and yeah, this is just that so much, like to like the maximum level. It splices genres in such crazy creative ways. I don't really know how to classify this. People would say it's a horror. It's kind of comedy at times, thriller, drama. It doesn't really have a specific genre. I guess it would be like horror, borderline sci-fi due to the concepts of it. But yeah, I don't think you can really put this in a box. It's kind of its own thing. I love how hands-on the director, Coraline Fargier, has been in her direction. Movie released some behind-the-scenes footage of her directing where she's literally like operating the camera, has a camera on a helmet, and is like very much like in the trenches with the practical making of the film. Like, it's so cool to see her just so involved with it and so passionate for it. So if you haven't seen this, go into it blind. I promise you'll have a blast. Number 4, Conclave. I had no idea that Conclave would be as compelling as it was. I was hooked from the get-go. Went to see this with Seth in the cinemas, and yeah, it was immediately afterwards we were like, this is one of the best films of the year. The screenplay is so well done. It makes the papal election feel like a high-stakes political thriller, which I guess it is, but yeah, it really is just so compelling. It's like a page-turner movie. It's like the scene ends and you're like, what's happening next? It always leads into the next thing. There's always intrigue. It just always spurs on. It always keeps itself propelling forwards, kind of like 12 Angry Men, I guess, in a roundabout way, where you're always guessing in the best way as to what's going to happen next. I'd say it even feels like a Christopher Nolan film at times, building in tension towards breaking points. It's such a well-constructed edit. I think they should get best editing, personally. There's not much more to say on this other than I think it's one of the films that I've recommended to people the most and I've discussed with in person the most. I think it's really accessible and I probably could see this going on to win Best Picture. I know at the moment some of the front runners are The Brutalist, Conclave and Anora. Probably going to be between Anora and Conclave. I wouldn't be upset if this won. I think it's a very strong film overall. At number 3, I'm Still Here. This was the final film of the 10 that I saw, just seeing it a few days ago at the time of recording. And at first I thought it might be recency bias putting it this high in the list, but I've sat with it for the few days and it is this good. I knew literally nothing going into this outside of the knowledge that Fernanda Torres won the Golden Globe and she's apparently incredible in it, receiving a lot of praise. And the whole film just hits like a ton of bricks. I cried at the ending. It's one where you just kind of have to sit through the credits and unpack mentally what you've just witnessed. It's told in such a careful, gentle way and is so filled with longing. Fernanda Torres is my pick for Best Actress. She's a linchpin that centres the story, showing her demeanour change over time. Over the runtime, her becoming a completely different character to when you see her in the opening shot to the end. Obviously, there's time jumps and big things that happen, but seeing how the events change her physically and emotionally and mentally is pretty staggeringly impressive acting. I really hope this has a shot of winning, but I'm at least hopeful that it will win the Best International Feature, which is very much deserved. At number 2, fittingly, is Dune Part 2. Yeah, here we go. I just love Dune so much. It's such a banger. It was such a peak cinema watching experience. Seeing this in IMAX opening night with friends was just staggering. It's hard to grasp and kind of wrangle and wrap your head around like what an achievement this is. This immediately jumps into the conversation and the lists of best sequels of all time. Like, for me, this is up there with The Dark Knight. It's up there with The Two Towers. It's up there with Empire Strikes Back. I think it's just such a feat. I could probably talk about this for like an hour or so on its own, why this is so phenomenal. But with it being out for just about a year now, it's been analysed and scrutinised to death. Denis Villeneuve just delivers a masterclass in not just sci-fi directing, but directing across the board. It's one of the best adaptations of all time. And it is criminal that he's not nominated for Best Director. I don't know what the Academy has against him, but yeah, this is like, he should be the nominee and winner for Best Director for this, hands down. I obviously hope Dune Messiah is incredible too, but I can fully see that over time that Dune Part 2 will be revered as one of the best sequels of all time, being such a gem middle installment. The cinematography, the performances, the world building, the pacing, the score, everything is just operating on the top of the game. It's just brilliant, honestly. I love it. Don't have much more to say. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, go and watch both Dune Part 1 and Part 2. And number 1, my favourite of the bunch, is Anora. If anyone watched my ranking of everything that I watched last year, this and Dune are literally in the same spots, and for good reason. Anora is the most tonally diverse film I've seen in ages. It's the most I've laughed in the cinema all year, and it's such a profound ending. I know there was comments sort of leading up to this being like, oh, does Sean Baker actually have what it takes to tackle the subject of sex workers? And obviously he has done a lot with his filmography in the past, with Red Rocket and Tangerine, and the Florida Project, and yeah, he really just shows, like, if you had any doubts by the end of this and the last shot, you're like, oh yeah, he gets it. Like, he fully understands people in this profession and the character of Annie. Like, yeah, he gets it. It's the first Sean Baker film that I've seen. I'm aware of the themes and subject matters of all the other ones, and I'm looking forward to exploring the rest of his filmography now. The way it pivots to being an all-out screwball comedy in the second half is just incredible. I could watch it over and over again, and I think I'm probably going to watch it either just before or just after the Oscars, because it's just so compelling, and it's just got such an allure to it. It's just such a fun time. Like, you just know going into it that you're gonna enjoy it. I hope it wins Best Picture, but like I said, I feel like it is a 3-horse race at the moment between this, Conclave, and The Brutalist. I think The Hollywood Reporter is currently putting Anora as the favourite due to it winning at the Directors Guilds and Writers Guilds and some of the other awards along the way. I'm pretty sure it got the Palme d'Or as well at Cannes, so yeah, I think this probably is the front runner, and if it won, I would be so happy because I think this is probably the best overall film of the 10. Okay, so that's my rankings of the 10 films. Here's just a handful of quick predictions, not who I necessarily want to win, but who I think will win. I think Best Supporting Actor will go to Kieran Culkin. I think Supporting Actress will go to Zoe Saldana. Best Actor to Adrian Brody or Timothée Chalamet. I'm leaning more towards Timothée Chalamet after the Screen Actors Guild. And Best Actress to Demi Moore. I think Best Adapted Screenplay will go to Conclave. I think Best Original Screenplay will go to either Anora or A Real Pain. I think Best Director will probably go to Brady Corbett for The Brutalist. I think Best Animated Film is really, again, another three-horse race between Wallace and Gromit, Wild Robot and Flow. I think that probably might go towards The Wild Robot. Best International Feature, I think will go to I'm Still Here. And lastly, prediction for Best Picture, I actually think this will go to Anora. I think, realistically, Anora or Conclave toss-up, I think it probably will go to Anora. And that's that. So thanks for listening to this short episode, a little rambly solo adventure for episode 20, but I thought, having been the first time that I've actually managed to watch all 10 Best Picture nominees before the Oscars, I thought it'd be cool to kind of render some thoughts and give a quick ranking. So by the time this is posted, it's probably the day before or the day of the Oscars. So thanks for listening. Feel free to share it about if you can, that'd be great. For more information on the podcast, check out all of our social media links. They'll be in the episode description and on our link tree. And we hope to see you next time. Thank you very much for listening. Bye.